Good morning, everybody, or good evening. How's everybody doing? Morning, Renstallvilla channel. Welcome. And also, it is November 10th, 2023 in my time zone, so happy birthday, any Marines in chat. Semper Fidelis. 248 years. Today, we're going to be talking all about Godzilla Minus One. I was fortunate enough to be able to see it in the theaters over here. And I understood about 25% of the dialogue, so I'm supplementing some details with the Wikipedia plot summary, but I already did my spoiler-free review and initial impressions over on Twitter. So today, I'm going to be diving into the plot, and I'll be talking complete spoiler-free fire zone here, so if that's not what you came for, check out my review on Twitter or check out some of the other spoiler-free reviews on YouTube. Part of the reason I wanted to do this review is that there aren't a ton of spoiler reviews up on YouTube yet. And some of them, I've enjoyed all the reviews I've listened to on YouTube, but I feel like some of them leave out certain details I would like discussed in a review. So this is me throwing my hat in the ring to talk about this movie and get everybody hyped up for its December 1st release in the US. I'm going to briefly adjust my audio here. Looks like it's peaking. So I'll talk about the movie, and then this is a live stream, not a video, so I'll be available for any Q&A of anything I didn't address in my review. And Minna's enjoying her newfound hobby of editing videos, so she'll be able to take this and chop it up into a more concise review video at some point as well, if you missed this stream or want to come back to it after you've seen the movie. Right, audio looks like it's fixed. So we'll be, I'm stealing the strategy from another review. We're going to use the plot summary on Wikipedia, and then I'm going to embellish it with everything that this leaves out, and give my thoughts on the film. Patranodon, welcome, good morning. Alright, so Godzilla Minus One, written and directed by Takashi Yamazaki. He got his start in visual effects, so this is being written and directed by a visual effects guy, which I think part of why it's so good, part of why the visual effects are so good. Like when his background on there definitely means he's writing to what he knows is achievable and what he knows will look good on film. Worked on the Space Battleship Yamato live action movie from 2010. He did the film The Eternal Zero, which I have not seen, but it's on my to-watch list. Great War of Archimedes. He's worked on a lot of stuff. He's worked on some historical films before, some sci-fi films before, and he directed a Godzilla sequence in another film. It was Always Sunset on 3rd Street. So he has all of the qualifications to make a great Godzilla movie, which is what he decided to go and do. And this film was made for the 70th anniversary of Godzilla, which next year, November 3rd, 2024, will be 70 years since the original film came out in Japan. Will incidentally also be my 6th wedding anniversary, so that will be nice. And this film it's not a reboot for a sequel per se. It hits certain plot beats of the original, but I would not say it's attempting to be a remake or even like a spiritual remake or successor. It is, well, it's like in the same vein as Godzilla 84, and yeah, I'll put it in the same vein as Godzilla 84, where it's going back to being a film about man versus Godzilla. It's going to pay homage to the original in some ways, but it's not intending to be a remake. I don't think this one's intended to be the start of a new series either. I'll get to the ending when I get there, but the director said the ending's not meant to be sequel bait so much as it is his own storytelling preference. So, and it's not as radical a departure from the character as Shin Godzilla was either. It's yeah, it's a good film following in the footsteps of Godzilla 84 and Shin to an extent, but not as much. So, you want to follow with the plot summary? I'm just using the Godzilla -1 plot summary on Wikipedia here. Alright, here we go. So, 1945, at the end of World War II, Koichi Shikishima, a kamikaze pilot, feigns technical issues with his plane and lands on Odo Island. So, great opening shot of the film. Opens up on on his aircraft, which I believe is a A6M0 from Mitsubishi. Given the stage of the war, this is at the end of World War II. So you start opening shot, his aircraft's flying in, soundtracks kicked in with the music they play when he's in the aircraft reminds me of some of Joe Hisaishi's composition. Specifically, it reminds me a little bit of Princess Mononoke and Howl's Moving Castle, I think. It's got a really unique and different sound than a lot of Godzilla soundtracks. The score in general is excellent, and you've got a mix of new stuff, like the themes that play with the aircraft, and then you have some excellent throwback tracks to the original Akira Ifukube score. And there's a lot of sound effects worked into the soundtrack, not in a distracting way, but like, using something that sounds like an air raid siren, but it's not an air raid siren in film. It's just like it's being used as an instrument in the soundtrack. The music here in the trailers is the soundtrack. That's not trailer music. So it's really cool because it makes the movie actually hits harder than the trailers, which isn't always the case. Like for King of the Monsters, they use that awesome Clair de Lune orchestration for the trailer, and they never use it in the film. And like that trailer hits harder than the movie. Not the case here. Same music in the trailer and the film. Excellent score. And this movie hits hard with it. So we open up on the shot of the Zero flying into an island, and we can see that it has a undropped bomb strapped to it. So he lands, and then all the mechanics gather around the aircraft. This is where he tells them, like, oh, he had technical issues with his aircraft, so he wasn't able to carry out his mission. So Shikishima, kamikaze pilot, so his job was to go fly his aircraft and just fly directly into an enemy ship to destroy it in a suicide attack. Last name Shikishima was slightly on the nose. It was the name of one of the 4 subunits of the first Kamikaze Special Attack Squadron. and is also a more poetic name for the country of Japan itself. So they've got a lot of meaning tied up in his last name there. But so lands on the island, tells them there's something wrong with his aircraft, walks over to the shore. Then there's a scene that I want to watch again with subtitles because the lead mechanic Tachibana comes over to talk to him, and I think it's because he suspects that Shima is lying about having technical issues with the aircraft, and that he ran away from his mission to suicide attack the enemy. I think that's the conversation that they're having. I don't know for certain. Then, while he's at the coastline, he notices all of these dead fish start to pop up in the water. And he's like, oh, that's weird. I wonder what that's about. But that's all during the daytime. Oh, and the island he lands on is Odo Island. For anyone who's seen the original film, Odo Island is the first site where Godzilla appears, and where prior to the emergence of the irradiated form of Godzilla in the original, the natives of Odo Island already have, like, Godzilla's already part of their lore over there. They see him as a sea god that they offer sacrifices to appease his wrath. So, significant location where he lands. Then that night, air raid sirens go off, watchtower shining the spotlight around to see what's going on. And it is not an air raid, it is Godzilla. And this is prior to being nuked. So this Godzilla is much smaller and is like basically the Godzillasaurus form from the original film, and then also in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, you get to see his Godzillasaurus form. This one looks, this is the most badass looking Godzillasaurus they've put to film yet. He's got almost a, like, but so you can see in the picture I've got here, that's the final form of Godzilla in this film. So it looks a lot like the Heisei design, but I see some influence from the legendary Godzilla in it. The legendary Godzilla is like a bear crocodile almost. Yeah, this one's not so much a bear, but his Godzillasaurus form, there's some like kind of crocodilian and more dinosaur looking elements in it. It's a really cool looking design. So this opening attack scene is like, this is when you know it's going to be an intense film, because Godzilla attacks the camp where all the maintainers and the pilot are, and this is like full on like the most brutal like Jurassic Park scene that they've got. I didn't watch the later Jurassic World films, but it's a good dinosaur attack scene. They're all in a trench with their rifles. And so here's the key part of Koichi Shikishima's character in this film is that he's plagued by survivor's guilt because he feels like he is constantly like running away and letting down his fellow soldiers in his country. Sometimes the case, sometimes not. Like kamikaze attacks, like it was. His country's telling him to go die in a suicide attack, so he feels like a coward for failing to carry out his attack. But like, suicide attacks not right at the end of the day. You're not supposed to kill yourself, not intentionally like that. But the way his culture sees it at the time is like his duty is to go and die in that attack. So coming back alive at all is a huge failure for him. So that's what starts it. And then here when Godzilla's attacking, he's supposed to go, the mechanic tells him, like, look, we can't kill this thing with our rifles, but your plane's parked right there, and the Zero had two 7.7 millimeter guns on it and two 20 millimeter guns on it. And at this point, Godzilla is still just a dinosaur. So if a bunch of 303 doesn't kill him, the 20 millimeter definitely should. The mechanic's like, dude, we'll distract him. Like, you go sneak over to your aircraft, climb in, wait for him to walk past your aircraft, and then light him up with your aircraft's guns. Save the day. So he does get out of the trench, goes over, hops in the aircraft. He's sitting there with the guns. He's looking through the reticle. Godzilla's walking right past his aircraft and, like, almost looks him right in the eye, but Godzilla doesn't actually see him. So he's got the opportunity right there to end the whole film and just blow Godzilla away. But he doesn't pull the trigger. Instead, bails out of the aircraft and runs away. At which point, Godzilla lays waste to the rest of the camp and kills everybody except for Shikishima and the lead mechanic Tachibana. So, Shikishima wakes up the next day, finds Tachibana's already collected all the rest of their dead teammates. And Tachibana's furious with Shikishima for failing to kill Godzilla and for running away and leaving them all to get killed. So they get picked up by a rescue vessel heading back to Japan. At that point, like, Tachibana's not speaking to Shikishima anymore. They part on very unpleasant terms. And Tachibana basically holds him responsible for everyone else that died on the islands because he had the chance to shoot Godzilla and he didn't. So then, at that point, war's over. We go back to where Tokyo's in ruins from the Allied firebombing campaign. Shikishima makes his way back home. Fine, not only has his house been destroyed, but his entire family is dead. He runs into a neighboring lady nearby. She knew he was left as a kamikaze pilot. And so then she started tripping into him on, like, your whole family died, my whole family died, you shouldn't even still be alive, like, you're a disgrace for your failure to successfully carry out your kamikaze attack and die gloriously for the Empire. After that, there's starts relationship with Noriko Oishi, and they have adopted a child whose parents were lost in the bombing of Tokyo during World War II. So again, he's wandering around the city, then this girl runs up to him and is just like, here, take this baby. She's being chased by other people, so she just hands him the baby, runs off. So he's just sitting there for a while with the baby. And then he almost, after a while, he almost leaves the baby and runs away from that too. And just, sits on the bench like, I'm just going to walk away. But then he looks back and he's like, all right, I can't just leave this baby lying here. So he hangs onto the baby. And then Noriko eventually comes back, having thrown off her pursuers. And they all start living together in the ruins of Noriko's house. She's lost all of her family too. And so the two of them start living in the house together to help raise the baby Akiko, who lost her parents. And this is where I think the film succeeds more so than Shin Godzilla in making Godzilla scary. Because in Shin Godzilla, you don't really get a sense that any of the bureaucrats are in, personal danger. okay, if Tokyo gets leveled, then they'll probably all die. And we see in Shin Godzilla some of them do die, but again, it's a result of Godzilla's larger rampage. Like there's nothing really personal about what Shin Godzilla does. And at the end of the day, like the main character of Shin Godzilla really is more just like the people and government of Japan as a whole, like coming together to save the day. So the individual characters, like you like them, the main characters are likable, but you're not super invested in, whether they live or die, and they don't really feel like they're in danger of, you know, dying personally to Godzilla. It's Shin Godzilla is more about the group. Godzilla Minus One focuses much more in on this Ersatz family that's formed in the wake of the war and the small group of friends around them. And it makes the horror much more effective because, like, there's only a few of them. And this Godzilla is very different from Shin Godzilla. Like, they're in personal danger from Godzilla, who is much angrier in this film and is like, no, he is actually coming for you, possibly for you specifically. So this little section here after the intense opening really sets up the stakes for the rest of the film. Also, this is the first look we get at post-war Tokyo. I don't know how much of this was destroyed building sets and how much of this was done in CGI. And that's a good thing, because it all just, like, excellent, effective set design. All the period costuming is cool. It's funny in the credits, one of the companies they thank in the credits is one of the local stores around here that specializes in antique and vintage and foreign clothing. I'm like, I know why they're in the credits. They probably helped a lot with the costuming, but all the costuming and production design looks excellent during this part. So Shikishima comes back from the war. His neighbor continues to remind him that he's a disgrace for failing his suicide mission. Starts up a kind of family, and then goes to get a job and start trying to rebuild his life. So gets a job on this old, it's like a modified fishing boat, modified tugboat, where he's working as a minesweeper. Post-war, they drive around on the boat, dragging naval mines up to the surface, where they then use the machine gun on top of the boat to blow up the mines from a safe distance. There's a neat scene here. I like it because it was a scene where I'm like, I can't tell what they're saying, but I can tell like what the purpose of this scene is from the way they're talking to each other. Where they pull the mine up to the surface, so the mine's bobbing on the water, the boat's bobbing on the water, and the gunner on the crew is struggling to hit the mine. It takes him like quite a few shots before he's able to land a hit on the mine. Then Shikishima, who's the newest member of their crew, is like, hang on. I was a fighter pilot. Like, I know how to calculate a firing solution between two moving objects. So then he gets on the gun. And he, like, lines up the sights just right, and he's like, alright, this is familiar. And he one-shots the mine with the machine gun. And from there on, gains the respect of the crew, and then we get a nice montage where he's just working his mine clearing job and like building more camaraderie with this new crew, most of whom are either naval veterans from the war or engineers from the war. And so we get a nice montage here. He's got his new job. He's making new friends. And we slowly start to see the ruined house he and Noriko and Aki are living like get rebuilt, repaired, have additions added to it. Having a dinner party with his friends. Like, Japan is rebuilding. Shikishima's life is improving. And then Noriko gets a job in Ginza, while the neighbor lady looks after the kids. So everything is looking good. Life's being rebuilt. And then we get the Bikini Atoll Operation Crossroads nuclear test, where Godzilla gets nuked. And this is also the test that inspired the original film. Brief aside here with the voyage of the Lucky Dragon number 5. So, if you ever wondered why the original Godzilla film and Godzilla 84 like to open up with fishing boats on the water, Lucky Dragon number 5 was a fishing vessel. I go Fukuro. So, this is a fishing boat that was out at sea when the Castle Bravo tests were conducted at Bikini Atoll in March 1st, 1954. So this is different Bikini Atoll test than the one in Godzilla -1, but this is the real world event that inspired the original Godzilla film. Castle Bravo test at Bikini Atoll, and then the crew of the Lucky Dragon number 5 runs into the fallout from the test. So all the nuclear fallout dust falls on the ship, and so the crew heads back to Japan, but they're already starting to feel the effects of the radiation poisoning. And so this fishing vessel comes back into port. Most of the crew, all the crew are sick. Some of them survive, some of them survive, live to old age. Others die from the radiation poisoning. But this event was a big incident when it occurred in Japan. And partially inspired the events of Godzilla. This was less than 10 years after the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Historical aside there. But this is the Operation Crossroads nuclear test in 1947. This is where the Godzillasaurus gets affected by the tests and mutated into the Godzilla that we all know. Massive, with the radiation scarred look to his scales, and now he has the atomic breath that he did not have when he was just a Godzillasaurus. So this is and the way they do that scene is cool too. Like they show the bomb going off at Bikini Atoll, and then it's just a close up of like Godzilla's eyes as like we see the scales and everything around it get burned up by the radiation and start to mutate and shift. And that's really like I think the defining feature of -1's Godzilla is like they really lean into like this guy was just a large marine dinosaur that had survived into the present age. And sometimes he goes up on Odo Island to hunt, but otherwise he stays in the ocean. And now we have mutated him beyond measure, and we have made him incredibly, incredibly angry. And that carries through the rest of this film of like this Godzilla is in pain and this Godzilla is mad. And he's mad at you and he's coming for you. So he's mutated. Then we get a montage It was really cool. They did this with like nautical charts of and like naval report charts and some historical footage here. But mutated Godzilla starts working his way from Bikini Atoll to Tokyo, attacking American vessels and submarines along his way. So the next time that uh, he's making his way towards Japan, and then this was something I missed because I didn't pick it up in the Japanese, but the reason this movie is not General MacArthur and the Army of Occupation versus Godzilla is that the U.S. doesn't want to send more military equipment or weaponry to stop Godzilla in Japan because they're worried that it will be seen as an escalation by the Soviet Union in the Cold War. So that's basically how this movie is like, all right, this is going to be a Japan versus Godzilla fight, not a U.S. and Japan versus Godzilla fight. So now we go back to Shikishima and the minesweeping crew, and they've been retasked at this point to become basically like part of the home island defense against Godzilla. So now instead of being a minesweeping vessel, they have 2 mines on their ship. It's like, all right, if Godzilla shows up, you're going to drop these mines and try to blow them up. And you learn this as they're out at sea right next to the destroyed wreckage of a naval vessel that's just listing on its side with giant gun emplacements are destroyed, giant gashes throughout the whole hull, and they're there in their little fishing boat, like, all right, we're gonna stop whatever did this to the ship with our little boat and our mines. It's a good moment for the crew too, because the younger guy, Barkenhill, is basically saying like, yeah, this is impossible. Like, what the heck do they think we're doing out here? Like, do you see what it did to this ship? And the badass captain's just like, no man, like this is our duty, and we're gonna kill this thing if it shows up. The captain's a great character. So this is the shot from the trailers you see of Godzilla shows up. You see you haven't seen fully mutated Godzilla yet, so you just see his dorsal plates coming out of the water now as he swims around the ship. And this is one of my favorite scenes in the movie because they don't show off all of Godzilla yet. They show enough, and they lean into Godzilla's amphibious nature. They lean into the Kujira part of Gojira. For the Gojira's name in Japanese was just a mashup of Gorira and Kujira for gorilla whale. So they're leaning into the Kujira part here of Godzilla as a monstrous whale, like sea monster. And it's my favorite scene in the movie, so that's why I decided to use it for my background here, where like right, this is what you get to see at first in this scene is you just see the dorsal fins and then you see the head. And this looks great on a big screen, like just the massive size of Godzilla's head there. The angry eyes, like it's awesome. So he shows up. Boat's like, all right, full throttle, let's do this. It was this is one of those parts where on Twitter I was like, this movie approaches the mythic, like this like Moby Dick like confrontation between the sea monster and the captain and his ship, where he's like, all right, he's here, we're gonna kill it. They take off using the winch you can see on the back of the ship there. Drop the first mine in the water. Floats back towards Godzilla, running out on cable. So they remote detonate the mine via the cable. Blows up next to Godzilla. No effect, just makes him angry. Shikishima's manning the guns on top, shooting Godzilla. Also not having an effect. They kick out the second mine. You see it go like kind of by Godzilla's cheek. And it cuts back to the ship. And they're like, all right, detonate it. Twist the detonator. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. They realize the line has been severed. They've got no way to detonate this thing remotely. Then we cut back to Godzilla and we see he's actually, the mine is in his mouth now because he's got his jaws open. Shikishima's back on the guns and using his fighter pilot accuracy detonates the mine in Godzilla's mouth. Massive explosion. Smoke clears. And we see Godzilla's head, like, half of it, the left side of his face has just been blasted away by the mine. And you're like, holy cow, that worked. Like, if they have more mines, maybe they can kill him. And then we see how they interpreted this Godzilla's form of the healing factor. Healing factor has always been more or less part of Godzilla's power set. Typically, it doesn't come into play in the movies themselves so much as in between films. It's used to explain why, even though Godzilla got thrashed last film, like he's basically back to full health, or at least is able to heal partly. Like in Tokyo SOS, he's got the big scar on his chest from where he got shot with the Absolute Zero cannon from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. And it's been used to explain how he comes back after he's supposedly been killed too. Like in, I want to say it's GMK, where the last shot is his heart continuing to beat on the surface of the ocean floor. For this film, they went beyond all of that. He's got straight up like Wolverine style regeneration, so half his face has been blasted off, and you just see it start to reconstruct itself in real time. And it looks great. The effects work in this film is incredible, especially considering it has a $15 million US budget. It's, some other reviewers have talked about how it doesn't look as good as Marvel movies or something. I don't know. I think it looks flawless. I think it looks better. Like, what this movie does with its budget and with the way its effects are utilized has way more impact than, say, Man of Steel is my go-to for, like, boring special effects, because that was the first movie where I was sitting in the theater watching Metropolis being destroyed and realized, like, there's a lot going on screen, and I'm bored. Because just lots of CG explosions. This film is the anti-Man of Steel. This is like, we only have like so much special effects budget. We're gonna put most of it into Godzilla, who looks amazing. And then we're not gonna repeat ourselves. We're gonna do like one type of each scene once and do it the best way we can the first time. And like the impact it has is awesome for like what's actually shown on screen versus what's implied off screen, or what's just shown once. Like, punching way above its weight class for its budget, and I think that's because you have it written and directed by a visual effects guy. Like, look at Godzilla here in my background. Like, it looks awesome. Like, you've got the angry eyes, got the detail on the scales, you've got that like kind of mottled color to show the scale color versus the radiation burns. And it like, and they're doing all of this, like almost all these scenes are in broad daylight too. Like, they're not afraid and trying to like hide the model in the dark. They're like, look at this beautiful Godzilla we created. We will show him off in broad daylight, in the water. It's awesome. So Godzilla's face regenerates, and they're like, alright, we're dead now. We're out of mines. We cannot outrun this thing. When to the rescue comes Japanese cruiser Takao. Comes in to save the day, opens up with the 5-inch guns, opens up with the 20-centimeter guns, blasts Godzilla. Guns are effective. Now Godzilla's attention is on the Takao. And he attacks the Takao, starts to climb up on the superstructure. Badasses manning the Takao continue to fight back, even as Godzilla's like rending and climbing onto their ship. Like, even as the ship's starting to turn, as he tries to climb on, like, you see the gun turrets turn, open up point blank at Godzilla. And it actually works. Like, Godzilla falls off the ship, and you're like, holy cow. The mines worked. The naval guns worked. Like, we can actually fight Godzilla this way. It's working. And then Godzilla, being the angry sore loser that he is, falls into the water. And you see the water turn, start to glow blue. And then Godzilla unleashes the atomic breath from underwater on the Takao, destroying it instantly. It was great how they did this too, because again, they haven't spoiled yet what the atomic breath looks like, how he charges it up. You just see the effect. Blue glow underwater, and then the Takao vanishes in a nuclear explosion. But the Takao was able to buy time for Shikishima and the crew to make it safely out of Godzilla's range, and Godzilla's damaged enough by the attack that he doesn't come chasing after them. So now we get to go back to Tokyo. There's a brief interlude where Shikishima talks to Noriko about Godzilla's attack on the ship, and then I think this is where it's actually first revealed to the audience that, again, I can only understand about a quarter of the dialogue, but I think this is where he actually tells somebody else, like, hey, my plane didn't have technical issues, like, I abandoned my suicide mission because I was afraid to die, and now I've just turned into a man who runs away from everything. I ran away from Godzilla on Odo Island when I could have killed him. You know, I almost ran away from Akiko. Now I ran away from Godzilla again. And Noriko's able to comfort him and, like, be someone that will, like, understand him and isn't going to, like, tell him he's a disgrace and isn't going to abandon him the way he feels like other people have. And that's really, they're setting that up both as a good character moment, but also just to twist the knife with what happens next. So after that, Godzilla finally makes landfall. We see him come out of the water and get the full look at Godzilla. Again, in broad daylight. They're not afraid to show off all the work they put into the Godzilla model. Godzilla makes landfall in Tokyo. And where does he choose to attack but Ginza, which is where Noriko got her job. So Shikishima's at home, hears over the radio that Godzilla's attacking Ginza. He's like, that's where Noriko works. I gotta go find her. So he takes off. Godzilla rampages through Ginza. This is where a lot of the shots from the trailer come, and this is also why you don't know it at the time, but the trailer does spoil a lot of the film in that because it doesn't repeat itself, right? You don't get multiple Godzilla rampages through the city. You get Godzilla's one attack on Ginza, and that's for all the marbles. So that's where they're showing off, like, all the cool things they can do. This is also the part that has the most callbacks to the original, but in new ways. So, for example, you get this scene where Godzilla, like, picks up the train in his mouth and shakes it around. In the original film, you didn't know anybody in the train. You're just like, oh no, it's a train. There are people in there, but I don't know them. In this film, Noriko is in that train, and so you get to see that whole scene from her perspective inside the train car in Godzilla's mouth as she tries to figure out how to survive. She's able to grab onto a piece of the train car and hold on long enough until Godzilla's head is over the water and she can drop out of the train car into the water and escape. You also get the reporters on a tower scene gets referenced as well, except this time they're on the roof of a building next to Godzilla, takes out the rest of the building underneath them, and you get a cool shot as like the roof slides sideways as everybody's rolling down. But this is the destruction of Ginza is brutal. The effects work is really good. I love the parts where like Godzilla's foot comes down, there's a brief pause, and then the ground gives way underneath his foot as like pavement bends upward from his tremendous weight. And what's the other thing this film does really well is like there's very outside of like the Jurassic Park opening, the destruction is largely bloodless in the sense that, like, you know people are dying, you know people are being trampled on, but the movie doesn't have to show you like the gory details and the mangled bodies to like sell you on the brutality of Godzilla's rampage. Like I think this film got like a G or a PG rating in Japan. Like over here it would definitely be PG-13, but like it's a if you're a visual storyteller, then this film is like a master class in like how to get like emotional, like gut punching impact on the audience without turning your movie into a gore fest. Like the intensity and brutality of the attack is communicated well without devolving into excess. Like economy of force in storytelling. So Koichi is able to now Koichi finds Noriko in the city after she's climbed out of the water that she dropped herself into. They reunite just in time for Godzilla's atomic breath scene. I like how this movie, Shin Godzilla, and like even Legendary Godzilla, like all these newer Godzillas recently have all been like, we want to make first use of the atomic breath something like really stand out and not just be probably because there's just been so much time since the last Godzilla films were made. Like when you're making Godzilla films like back to back to back, there's not really a reason to hype up the atomic breath. It's like, God, it's one of his powers. Like, you know he has it. Like, we're just going to use it. But I love how these later films are like, you know, it's been a while. Let's do something cool with the atomic breath. So for Godzilla -1, charging up the atomic breath, the spines don't just glow blue, they glow blue, and they like pop out of his body like a not a hydraulic system, but like a kind of like a hydraulic system. Basically, like they're expanding to accommodate the additional energy being stored in them. They all like pop out, starting at the tail in sequence, and then when he uses the breath, they go back into his body. Atomic breath has been charged up at that point, and then he just releases like he basically spits an atom bomb out of his mouth. So it's not a ray, it's not a beam. He launches a blue-white, sphere out of his mouth. It hits, and then it detonates like an atom bomb into a mushroom cloud. So he only uses it once during this attack. It hits, detonates, cloud goes up, shockwave comes out, and so Noriko and Shikishima are standing right next to the corner of a building. Everyone's basically been watching, like, in shock and awe as Godzilla charges this up. Like, what's he gonna do? What's about to happen? Why is there this giant monster in Ginza? So Noriko sees what's about to happen. She shoves Shikishima behind a wall, and she gets blasted away by the shockwave from the blast of the atomic breath. And then, just in case you were like, oh, maybe she survived that, the vacuum formed by the explosion collapses, and all the air and the shockwave comes back in on itself to fill the vacuum. And it's like, okay, maybe you survive one shockwave, you're not surviving the shake and bake effect of the vacuum collapsing on itself. So Noriko, who's just been set up as like the one person that like unconditionally cares for Shikishima, taken out by Godzilla's atomic breath. And we're just left with Shikishima like lying on the street in the aftermath of the attack, just screaming in incoherent rage at Godzilla. Perfectly setting us up for the conflict between two very angry individuals who hate each other. Godzilla fires his atomic breath. He can only do it once before he has to recharge it. So after destroying Ginza, he returns to the ocean. One of the crew members on the fishing vessel is now, I think this was a twist, I can't tell if they revealed it earlier in the film, but basically reveals, oh, I'm actually a government scientist from the war that was basically tagging along on your crew to observe how things were going. I might be wrong about whether or not that's a twist, but it was a twist to me, so I enjoyed it. And it goes to Shikishima, who's, distraught at the loss of Noriko, and he's like, we're coming up with a secret plan to kill Godzilla. Are you in or not? And of course, Shikishima's in. So they gather together a bunch of manufacturers, engineers, and naval veterans from the war, and basically lay out, hey, U.S. isn't going to help us because they don't want to escalate things with the Soviet Union, and our own government isn't going to do anything either. So it's up to us to save our country from Godzilla. Here's the plan. So they do not. I like that they don't try to do a repeat of the Oxygen Destroyer at this point, because like has not been any Serizawa character in the film yet, like unless you want to count the scientist, but he doesn't really act like Serizawa, and there's been nothing to indicate he's had some secret super weapon he's been developing. So I like that they don't repeat themselves that way and come up with a new plan that has they don't even repeat something from another Godzilla film. I have seen every Toho Godzilla film, so they come up with a two-stage plan using their ships. Their plan is get Godzilla to come up in the ocean, and then using two ships, they're going to wrap a chain around Godzilla's waist containing a two-stage system. And the first stage fires gases out the top of the system to basically push Godzilla down to the bottom of the ocean, where he will be crushed by the immense pressures of the water above him, or at least forced into some kind of dormant state, trapped at the bottom of the sea. Then, if dragging him down to 1,500 meters fails to kill him, the second stage of the system activates a bunch of massive balloons around the side of the chain to then force Godzilla back to the surface at high speed to try and kill him via decompression. So this is something that can happen to deep sea creatures, not just divers. So, right, diving aside here, when you go every 10 meters of water, you descend below. You increase the pressure on your body by 1 atmosphere. So 1 atmosphere is what we experience here on the surface. Go below 10 meters of water, you're now at 2 atmospheres of pressure, 20 meters, 3 atmospheres, etc. So if you're scuba diving, scuba divers breathe in air at the pressure, at the ambient pressure of wherever they are in the water, because it comes out of the pressurized tank, and when it goes through the tube to the mouthpiece, at that point, it's no longer at the pressure it was in the tank. It now becomes equal to the pressure in the water. So if you go down, 20 meters and you're breathing in pressurized air, you're now breathing that air into your body at 3 atmospheres of pressure instead of 1 atmosphere of pressure, which means if you hold that air in your lungs and then ascend, it's going to expand in your lungs as the pressure decreases around it, and it'll pop your lungs like a balloon. So that's why you never hold your breath when you're breathing pressurized air. Never, ever, ever. If you ever go diving, never hold your breath breathing pressurized air. They'll hit that in your diving training. But the other thing that can happen, even if you're breathing properly, the nitrogen that you're breathing in the air under pressure also needs time to gradually work its way out of your system. So if you ascend too quickly without taking pauses along the way to allow the nitrogen to off-gas properly, you'll get the bends where you're going up, pressure's coming off of your body too fast for the nitrogen to off-gas and escape your system properly. So instead you get nitrogen bubbles in your blood, and you get an arterial gas embolism if one of those bubbles makes its way up to your brain. All which is to say, everything that can happen to a diver breathing air at ambient pressure can also happen to deep sea creatures who are also taking in oxygen, nitrogen at ambient pressure. At the aquarium here, they actually have a decompression chamber for the deep sea fish in case the pressure in their tank is lost. They can recompress the deep sea fish to try and save them. So the plan is, if we can't crush Godzilla with all of that pressure, if we can't compress Godzilla, we'll decompress Godzilla, drag him up real fast, and either damage his tissue from the rapid expansion of the air, or try and give him an arterial gas embolism. That's the plan. We then cut to what was one of my favorite parts in the movie as an aircraft guy was so they come up with the plan. You got the scene where it's like, all right, who's in? And a bunch of guys walk away because they're like, this plan's not going to work. We're just going to die. And then everyone else is sticking around like, all right, let's do this. We're going to kill Godzilla. So then they take Shikishima aside and they're like, oh, we got something for you. Check it out. I was not expecting this at all, so it made me want to clap in the theater, but I didn't, because that's not Japanese theater etiquette. But I was not expecting it at all. I figured they'd put him back in an aircraft again. So I'm like, all right, hangar, they're getting him in an aircraft. But the aircraft they give him is the Kyushu J7 Whiskey Shinden. This was a prototype fighter aircraft with a rear-mounted propeller. It was designed as a short-range, land-based interceptor to fight B-29s. They designed it to be highly maneuverable, but only 2 prototypes were made before the war ended, so it never saw mass production. Interestingly, the 2 of the test flights for this aircraft occurred on the same day as the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it's a particularly interesting choice for this film because Godzilla represents the atom bomb and Japan's nuclear fears, and so they're giving Shikishima to fight Godzilla this aircraft that was never completed but was test flown on the day of the atom bombings. It is an incredibly cool looking aircraft. Let me pull a photo into here. Yeah, when they slowly reveal it when they bring him into the hangar, and I'm like, is that? Oh man, it's the Shinden. Shinden means magnificent lightning. So that was really cool to see, but it is incomplete. They're like, we need somebody. We have this for you. We want to use it in the plan, but it's incomplete. It needs to be repaired. So Shikishima has to go recruit Tachibana, the mechanic from the beginning who hates him, to fix the aircraft for him. So he's sending. Oh, yep. Well, there you go. Let's make this fit. Where'd it go? There we go. There it is. Shinden. Look at that thing. So he has to recruit Tachibana. And here's I can tell from the dialogue, he goes to the post office and they're like, we don't know how to find this Tachibana guy. And he's like, please just give me the addresses for all the Tachibanas you have or something. He sends out a bunch of letters to try and get hold of Tachibana. And Tachibana finds him, clubs him over the head, and takes him prisoner and has him tied up in his house. It's like, why shouldn't I just leave you here to die instead, like you left all my buddies to die? Shikishima was able to convince him to help him. I couldn't understand all of the dialogue, but the general sentiment was yeah, I know I failed you back then. I need to make things right now. My war, that was the part I was going to say. My war isn't over. They're saying your war isn't over too. That was also a sentiment expressed at the end of the meeting to kill Godzilla as well, because it's all these guys that were in the Imperial Japanese Navy, and everyone's experience, the scene where Shikishima comes back and is just destroyed by his neighbor for him specifically failing to carry out his suicide mission, but also for losing the war in general. That's the microcosm of the experience all these guys have had of we lost the war, we let our country down, we've lost our honor. And so Godzilla coming back is their opportunity to be our war's not over. We will kill Godzilla, we'll save our country, and we can regain our honor. And that's how Shikishima convinces Tachibana to help them. So also in a nice character moment, when Tachibana appears here, he's all bearded and just looks like a ruffian. When he shows up the next day to work on the aircraft, he's all clean shaven, back in his mechanic's coveralls. And so gets to work finishing the repairs that need to be done to the Shinden. Additionally, he also opens up the compartment in the front of the fuselage and installs a bomb there. And he's telling Shikishima, look, if everything else about the plan is failing, there's a bomb in your aircraft. You can kamikaze Godzilla, fly into his mouth, detonate the bomb, and kill him. Also, in a wonderful piece of foreshadowing that I did not make the connection until after the fact, but as they're going over the aircraft before the mission, Shikishima notices that there is a German language placard on the seat in the aircraft. And he just kind of pokes at it and he's like, huh, that's interesting. Not much else is made of it. Straps into the Shinden, takes off. The awesome Joe Hisaishi ceiling music starts up again. And this time, as if things weren't worse before, Godzilla's making landfall again, and this time he's heading towards the neighborhood where uh, Shikishima's house is, where his adoptive daughter and the neighbor lady are. So we get some awesome shots of Shikishima doing strafing runs on Godzilla, whipping his plane out of the way at the last second to avoid getting snatched up by Godzilla or hit by his tail. Aviation scenes I always love aviation scenes, but these are nicely done, and it's also nice because so many times in these types of movies, like the aircraft come in for their delivery attack profiles, and there's like no consideration given for like how they were meant to escape that. So they always just end up getting like snatched up by the monster, smashed by its tail. So it's nice to see some thought put into it. Where it's like I can do a gun run on Godzilla and then still get my aircraft out of the way in time during the pull up. At this point, Godzilla's huge and mutated, so the guns aren't able to kill him like they could have when he was just a little dinosaur. But it does piss him off enough that he follows Shikishima out to sea into the trap. So Shikishima lures him out to sea. He wanders into the water, and then he sees just a little boat right there coming towards him. And so Godzilla charges up his atomic breath to attack the boat. It cuts to the boat where we can see that like the rudders basically, or the helm's been tied in place. There's nobody on the boat. It's a decoy. And Godzilla wastes his atomic breath, nuking the decoy. At which point we then cut to where everybody else actually is on their boats. They're like, all right. We go to the commander of the operation. They're like, all right, he's used his atomic breath. The decoy worked. We got him in the water. Like, let's go. And it's like timed. The commander's decision to be like, all right, begin the operation is timed perfectly with the return of the Akira Ifukube Godzilla score. Just syncs up beautifully as he's like, all right, begin the operation. And then the ships break formation and take off to their respective positions to carry out the plan. Plans go smoothly at first. Ships take up their formation, drive the circle around Godzilla. They kick the gas units into the water on their cables. They successfully encircle Godzilla, tie the system around him, and then activate it. Boom. Godzilla goes down towards the depths. That's like, alright, plan's going smoothly. You're watching the depth meter count down. They get him down to 1,500 meters. And they're like, alright, time to bring him back up. Kill him with decompression. Now that I think about it, I think the plan was always to use the decompression to kill him, because I don't think they had a way of knowing if he was actually dead once they got him to that depth. So they activate the balloons. Godzilla starts shooting back up to the surface. Stops at 800 meters. They're like, what's going on? Why can't we haul him up any further? And then you see all these punctured balloons start floating to the surface of the water. It's like, oh shoot. He figured out something was up. Destroyed the balloons. Now he's still caught by the chain at 800 meters. They're like, alright, we're going to drag him up ourselves just using the ships. Start to drag him apart using the ships. That's not enough to get him to the surface. When all of the guys that had previously walked away in the meeting and were like, this is suicide, we're not going to die fighting Godzilla, they all come to the rescue. They've all been rallied together by one of the crew members from earlier in the film. And they come in a big Dunkirk-style fleet of tugboats, pull up to the ships, throw their ropes on. So now you've got two ships and all of these tugboats hauling Godzilla back to the surface, and now it starts to work. Godzilla breaks the surface again. And it's really cool here because he's been down on the depths where it's like super cold. And so as he comes up to the surface, he's like covered in ice, and like his eyes are like rimed over, so now they're like just white, and they look like the zombie Godzilla eyes from Godzilla Mothra Ghidorah. Very cool looking visuals. Gets to the surface, and they're like, "Well, shoot, that didn't kill him. He's pretty badly damaged though." And then he starts to charge up the atomic breath once more. Everything goes into slow motion. All the characters are looking at, and it's like, "Well, we tried, and now we're all about to die." When you get the glint off a windshield, Shikishima, whose role had largely been completed at this point in acting as the decoy, comes flying in straight at Godzilla. You see him pull two levers. He runs straight into Godzilla's mouth, and the Shinden explodes as the bomb detonates. Godzilla's head is completely blown off by this explosion. You're like, alright, Shikishima finally carried out his kamikaze mission, destroyed Godzilla. And then, you see that chute blossom round. Shikishima comes falling out of the sky on his parachute. We cut back to Tachibana explaining to Shikishima, like, the reason there's a German placard on his seat is that he had installed a German ejection seat in the Shinden for Shikishima. And I love this part because it's like this movie is both like a celebration of the fighting spirit of the IJN veterans, and at the same time, it's a repudiation of things like kamikaze tactics, because Tachibana's, he's hated Shikishima since he failed him at the beginning and lied about having technical issues on his plane, is basically telling him, like, you should live. Like, you do not have to die just because the guy that came up with the kamikaze squadrons was like, you guys should go die fighting in this manner. So he's both able to carry off his kamikaze style attack on Godzilla's head and also ejects before the plane impacts Godzilla and survives. Godzilla's head is destroyed, and then what's really cool is you see all the charged up atomic energy that didn't get fired starts to destroy Godzilla from the inside. And they don't go for just like a big dramatic explosion, like shafts of blue light start to break through from the inside of Godzilla's body, and then he like starts to like crumble and fall apart, like almost like it reminded me a little bit of the Barad-dûr destruction at the end of Return of the King, but it's like falls apart around this glowing blue energy before it like expands and disperses him. And then a really nice touch, like all the sailors that were there trying to kill him, like as they see that they've succeeded and he's falling apart, they all like stand and salute Godzilla as he dies and goes down, like as if he were acknowledging him as a worthy opponent. Godzilla's defeated. Everybody comes back into port, or everyone's celebrating their return. And then the neighbor lady runs up to Shikishima, and at first she's angry because before Shikishima left on the mission, he had like left an envelope stuffed with basically like his will and a bunch of money and a letter next to Akiko's adoptive daughter's bag, and he was like, I'm going out there to die. I'm not coming back. So let me make sure she's taken care of. And so she's like, man, like how could you, can't just leave her like that. But also then she's like, we got a telegram that says to go to a hospital. And so goes to the hospital, and Noriko is all bandaged up. She's got her arm in a sling, half her face is swathed in bandages, but she managed to survive the nuclear blast. So the film and this is, so I haven't heard anyone else talk about this. It's not in the Wikipedia plot summary. So they find her alive. They're all super happy. They embrace. And the way the camera pans out of the scene, focusing on her neck, I can't tell if what we're supposed to be looking at is just the shadow from her, like from her robe on her neck, or if it's supposed to be like a black radiation burn or something, basically saying like, hey, we gave you the twist happy ending twist, she's alive. Now here's the double twist, like, oh, she's alive, but she's got leukemia, so like all of their happiness together is going to be short lived. I haven't seen anyone else mention that, so I'm not sure if I'm like misinterpreting what I'm seeing or not, but twist happy ending or possibly double twist bittersweet ending. And then finally you get down at the bottom of the ocean, you've got Godzilla's heart continuing to beat. And then we cut to the credits. Director said he went with that ending not as sequel bait, but because he thought it was a more cinematic experience to end it on that note of like, you've destroyed Godzilla for now, but you know he'll always find a way to come back. Then you hard cut to the credits. Your Ifukube Godzilla theme blasting, and most of us in the theater all just like sat there through the end of the credits because we were just like, that was incredible what we just watched, and we needed a moment to like just sit there and take it all in. There was a good mix of people in the audience. There were a bunch of kids there. I'm surprised none of them cried during the whole thing because I'm like, this is a pretty intense movie, but it's Japanese kids built different. So that covers the plot of the movie, most of the themes. The cinematography is good. The color grading is really good. It's got the like vintage sepia tone, but it doesn't go full like World of Tan or World of Gray. The fact that they shoot things in daylight helps a lot, and the fact that so many scenes take place on the ocean help a lot too, because then you've got these like rich blue colors of the sky and the sea to contrast with the like the old timey movie feel. The the effects work all works really well for me. Again, I'm like, this was made on $15 million. It looks great. At no point was I taken out of the film going like, that looks fake or that looks CG. Like, that movie pulls you into itself so well. It's like, maybe if I like went back frame by frame I would notice, but like in the moment, like I don't care. Like I'm sold by what I'm seeing on screen, and I'm invested in what's happening. It is, I'm gonna call it better than Shin Godzilla. I really like Shin Godzilla. This is better paced than Shin Godzilla. Shin Godzilla, like, I can't really think of what I would cut from Shin Godzilla. Like, I think it's a story that needs to be as long as it is, but I'm not gonna say that like the last third of the movie doesn't kind of drag sometimes. I think this is probably a more accessible movie than Shin Godzilla for a lot of people. Shin Godzilla is very much like, especially if you were watching it subtitled, like if you can't read fast and keep up with the subs of everything that's going on, or if you're not a fan of Hideaki Anno's directorial style, like it's a hard movie to get into. This one is more conventional in its approach, but it's very well done conventional. So I think if you're trying to introduce someone to Godzilla, this is a much better movie to use than Shin Godzilla for doing that. And I think, um, honestly, like Shin Godzilla is like grotesque looking in his design. This Godzilla is actually scarier. Both like the design works really well. The film really communicates the sense of like pain and wrath coming from this version of Godzilla. and then having a smaller cast that it spent time building up really makes you care about everything that's going on, because you're like, it's not just, unnamed sailors on this ship being destroyed by Godzilla, or, nameless people in Ginza getting destroyed, like Noriko's in danger. The crew of the minesweeping ship is in danger. Shikishima's in danger. Like, everybody the movie has made us care about is directly in danger from Godzilla. So whenever he's on screen, you're like, and also after showing like how destructive the atomic breath is too, it's not just like, oh, maybe they can, get out of the path of the beam and they'll be fine. It's like, no, if he charges that up, he is nuking grid squares off the map. Like, there's no surviving that, but unless you're Noriko, which I'm still not sure how I felt about the ending when I first saw it, especially with the possible double twist, but I'm like, you know what, this film is trying to be I think the film is overall trying to go for an optimistic note, so I think the ending is appropriate tonally for what the film's trying to go for. So I'm gonna call it a good ending. All of them. I'm gonna go see this again for sure, at least one more time when I can get a version with subs, because can't can't give it my full like perfect score until I know what the dialogue was. But it's a testament to the film's visual storytelling that even with my cursory understanding of the language, like, it's clear, even if the finer details are lost, it's clear what each scene is meant to be about, and it's communicated really well just through the acting, the blocking, what have you. So for anyone that's listening that's in Japan, even if your Japanese language is like nil, like, go see it. You'll still enjoy it. But I'm looking forward to seeing the subbed version as well, so I can evaluate the dialogue. But it was it was a great experience. I will I'll repeat what everyone else has said, saying go see it in IMAX, or at least on a really big screen with really good speakers if you can, because the sound design was incredible. It's like especially like getting the surround sound effect, like every like footsteps, like you feel the footsteps in your bones. Like Godzilla's roar is a lot like the traditional roar, but it's got this echoey effect added to it at the end, and with the surround sound, it just feels like all encompassing and incredibly menacing as you're watching it in the theater. Like, this was an excellent, like, this is the kind of movie, it's like with Top Gun Maverick, this is the kind of movie that's like, this is why theaters exist, is to see something like this and get the fully immerse yourself in the film and in the medium. Like, hmm, it was good. Easily easily a top five Godzilla movie. Just it does everything right, and it doesn't. I think the biggest thing to me was like the lack of repetition means every scene is very impactful. Right, you get one attack on Odo Island that's very Jurassic Park like, and then we never have another scene like that, so it sticks with you. You're not just like, oh, this was just like the prelude to something like this, but bigger and cooler later on. Like, no, that's the one you get. The battle at sea, that's the only naval battle like that in the film. The attack at the end at sea happens, but that's the operation they're carrying out there is vastly different than the mine and gunfight with the cruiser. So you get that one scene, and that's still one of my favorites in the movie, because it's just like full on like Moby Dick sea monster scene, which we've never gotten one that good in a Godzilla film before. Like Godzilla versus Kong kind of does it, but that scene is about Godzilla and Kong, and most other scenes, yeah, other scenes in other Godzilla films where Godzilla fights the Navy is typically pretty one-sided. Like Godzilla pops out of the water, uses atomic breath to blow up the model ships, and then moves on. And it's really just part of the montage of Godzilla's approach to the land. Like this is the this is the best Godzilla naval fight they've ever made, and it looks incredible. And you get the one, and then it's like, yep, we did it right the first time. We're not going to repeat ourselves. Ginza, boom, Godzilla destroys the city. It's not. A lot of other Godzilla movies like to open with like Godzilla appears and destroys some stuff, goes back to the sea, appears again, etc. And for some of those movies, I think it works because Godzilla's destruction of the city is not meant to be the main spectacle. It's Godzilla's fight with whatever monster is in that movie. So it makes sense that they're not going to treat it as important. But for this film, they do one Godzilla rampage through the city, one atomic breath, absolutely go for the throat with it, and they're like, all right, we can't do it any better than that, and we didn't want to do it any worse, any less than that to build up to this, like, here you go. Here's your Godzilla rampage scene. We are giving you the best. And then move on to the next scene where we've got the Shinden versus Godzilla is basically like a mini scene in itself before it leads into the larger operation. That's like, all right, here we go. Anti-Godzilla operation. Do it right the first time. And so the pacing works really, really well. There's a good rhythm between Godzilla's appearances and then building the emotional stakes or setting up plans for the future that'll work. So there's always like it's really well balanced so that whenever you're in a good character moment, like in the back of your mind, you're like, all right, they're happy now. Things are going well now. Godzilla's right around the corner, and any minute now we're gonna hear those footsteps or that roar again. So it keeps you on the edge of your seat and there's some good like humorous moments and heartwarming moments sprinkled in as well, so that you're on the edge of your seat. There's always the sense of Godzilla in the background, but like it has good, well executed moments of levity in there, so that you're not just like heart rate going a mile a minute the whole movie. And then covered the score. Already talked about the score. But score's excellent. I downloaded the whole thing after the movie. Turns out that not Japanese malls are good, but apparently CDs are so little used today that a Japanese mall doesn't even rate its own CD store. So that was a little disappointing. But I then got the whole thing off iTunes, so maybe I'm part of the problem. But the scores, honestly, there's some parts of the score I like to listen to on its own. Some of it I'm like, this is sort of hard to listen to outside of the context of the film because it's like it's kind of Christopher Nolan like too. But a lot of the soundtrack that's not like reorchestrations of the Ifukube score uses a lot of repetitious elements that work really well in the film because there's also like dialogue and sound effects and visuals going on. Just listening to it on its own does not always work as well, but it does. Man, it still brings back the mood of the film though. Like it's a really interesting and well done score that like I mean it's the kind of score that like if you did it poorly it would just be like repetitious or annoying, but they absolutely nailed it. Who was the composer? I should give him a shout out here. Music by Naoki Sato. who's also worked on Pretty Cure, X, Eureka 7, Sword of the Stranger, Blood Sea, Space Battleship Yamato film, Rurouni Kenshin film, Parasite live action, Journal Zero. Okay, so he has also worked. Oh, he composed the music for the victory ceremonies at the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo. And looking down the list of films he's worked on, a lot of them were also films that Takashi Yamazaki had worked on. So these guys worked together for. Yeah, the score was top notch. It's like I don't know if I can emphasize enough like how cool it is to me that like they didn't use separate trailer music, and so when you watch the trailer and you listen to the score and you watch the movie, like the movie is better than the trailer, which may sound weird to some of you, but there are movies where I'm like, I watched the movie and I was like, it was all right, but it didn't really like. I don't feel the need to rewatch it. Whereas like if I go back and rewatch the trailer, I'm like, man, this trailer still gets me way more hype than the movie actually did. Like specifically like King of the Monsters, like the Claire de Lune trailer for that is awesome. I'm like, I'll just watch the Claire de Lune trailer again. I don't need to see the movie. And then the John Wick 4 trailer was like, uh, that's probably because John Wick 4 was kind of a disappointment, but the trailer was incredible. Oh, Sideshow Channel 7, they are releasing it in vinyl in December. I will probably pick it up to go with the other Godzilla vinyls. Again, I don't know if it's one that I really want to like. There's some tracks from it I want to listen to on its own. I don't know if I want to listen to the whole score just on its own, but it's like a lot of the tracks really benefit from like they shine like as a part of the film rather than like divorced from all the other elements of the story. But at this point, I did this as a live stream for reasons, so at this point I'm here to answer any questions about the film or Godzilla or Tokusatsu in general from the audience. Also, welcome, while I was talking, welcome Petranodon, Sunny, and Sideshow Channel 7. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll turn it over to the audience for questions. Also, Sideshow Channel 7, I'm glad that I was able to convince you to go see it. I think you'll really enjoy it. And, you know, it's a good movie, so even though I've just spoiled everything for you, you will still enjoy it. Give you guys a minute to drop any questions in the chat. Oh yeah, it got a G rating in Japan, suitable for all ages. It's already made back half its budget in the opening weekend, which is awesome. It's incredible to me what they're doing with 15 million. I've heard some people, Wikipedia says 15 million. I've heard someone else say $30 million was the budget, but even 30 million is what, like 50 million less than the creator had. Creator was terrible, by the way. I ranted about it in on one of Minna's streams, but don't go see the creator. It's reskinned Avatar for transhumanists. That's the first movie I've ever walked out of the theater rather than finish watching because I'm like, I have better things to do with my life and see how this movie ends. But yeah, you do not need hundreds of millions of dollars to tell a compelling Godzilla film, which means like if the bracket's somewhere between 15 and 80 million, because like the creator visually looks great. I'll give it that. Like the special effects all looks excellent. So like I'm really curious once you break the $100 million mark, like where is all of that money going? Because most of the Marvel movies I saw before I stopped watching them, like I mean, sure the effects look nice, but like if the story isn't there to back it up, like a lot of it just feels like weightless and like sound and fury. And yeah, if you're a visual storyteller, watch this movie, study this movie, understand how it's able to get such impact out of everything it does. So turning on more Godzilla movie reviews when? Uh, well, as I have time, really. Like you saw how quickly Armored Core dropped off the radar for me. It's my day job's super busy out here, so unfortunately I don't get to stream nearly as often as I would like to. But with Minna really upping her editing game and her video creation game, then there's also more opportunities for me to just record stuff as I have time, and then I can see if Minna can stitch it all together. But if movie reviews is things you would like, let me know, and I'll put it on my list of things because my approach to man, it's almost been 1 year since I started streaming, and my approach has largely been to a combination of like old stuff that I like, occasionally trying to jump on flavor of the month stuff like with Armored Core, which also interested me on its own, but it was a good timing. And then talking about tokusatsu. So if you guys are here for the movie reviews and the Godzilla reviews and the Ultraman reviews, then I'm I'm your humble entertainer. Oh, and I also stopped doing the Blazar watch-alongs because that was also just becoming too it like reached a point where it was like I have an opportunity to the opportunities where it was like now's a good time to stream did not line up with now's a good opportunity to watch Ultraman because I was watching everything with Minna, and so it's like, well, if Minna's putting the kids to bed, then she can't watch with me while I stream, and yeah, it became easier. Where it's like, what if we just watch it together while the kids are still awake? So I can't stream it, but I also got super behind as well. King Igor, welcome. I have to wait for Blu-ray, which means it's going to be a long time before I get it. Got here late, must watch them getting later. Asian movie reviews is what I'm looking for. All right. Oh, speaking of Blu-rays, let me pull this link off my Twitter here. For anyone that watched my Shin Ultraman review, so like the original English subtitle Blu-ray released from Cleopatra earlier this year. If you did not hear, it was like hot garbage, terrible, uh, terrible subtitles. They didn't use the subtitles from the theatrical release. They basically released the film with the English dub, the Japanese language track, and then the English dub closed captions. So if you watched it in Japanese, you weren't actually getting a translation of what was being said in Japanese. You were getting the closed captions for the English dub translation. So let me drop the link right here. Raven Banner, who I'd never heard of before, but They look like one of these small Blu-ray shops that focuses on releases of like B movies and exploitation flicks. But they also apparently got the rights to distribute Shin Ultraman on Blu-ray with new subtitles. I guess these subtitles could still suck too, but I'm imagining they did this in response to the reaction to the Cleopatra release, so I pre-ordered it banking on the fact that the subtitles won't suck. So if anyone was interested in Shin Ultraman, good Blu-ray is out now. Right, well, if everybody's questions have been answered by the review, then I will be signing off. At some point, I'll put together, Minna will chop together a more concise and edited version of this, or that will be a little slightly less rambling. You can only edit so much out of it, but really enjoyed seeing the film, enjoyed talking with all of you guys about it. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I will see you at the next stream whenever my schedule allows. Have a good night, everyone, or yeah, for most of you, have a good night. Have a good day if you're over here with me. And let's see if there's anybody. Oh, one last thing. The gentleman whose music I use for my opening and ending screens here just released a new album recently. Let me drop that link in the chat too. Or Wither. Yeah, he just dropped a whole new album. Here you go. Check him out.